Probably. Okay, it says we're live. Hi, YouTube people who are joining us. I'm going to make sure that I get over there to the YouTube browser. Welcome to everyone who's over in Zoom with me. The people who are in Zoom with me are the ones who are my patrons and show supporters. If you would like to become a patron, go over to my page at Patreon. If you are joining me at YouTube, I believe there's a Patreon link. Okay, I have to mute the YouTube. There's a Patreon link over there if you'd like to become a patron. I wouldn't mind that at all. I don't know if you guys know, but when you go on Fox, on Tucker and stuff, unless you are what they call a Fox contributor, which I am not, you don't get paid for that or anything. So the amount that I get paid to do stuff like that is whatever you guys give me over at Patreon. And that is it. Yes, I'm trying to make a go of this. I'm hoping I can do the show with your own and everything else, but we'll see. I'd like to continue to bring this to you. So what am I doing today? I'm going to do a fairly informal, what I'm calling a debriefing of the appearance yesterday. Those of you who saw the appearance, I hope you're here because you saw it. You saw that it was under 5 minutes total in length. And a lot of that was the introduction and Tucker reading the setup, from the Women's March and everything. So there's very little that you can discuss in the 4.5 or 5 minutes or whatever, which is all I've ever had when I've been on his show. So there's some issues, of course, that I think could have been addressed and weren't addressed. I think maybe some questions he could have asked that might have forestalled some of the people who were criticizing me out on Twitter last night and everything else. So what I plan to do is address some of the concerns, which I think, given the fact that Tucker didn't ask certain questions clearly, may have been legitimate. Although I'm pretty sure that even if I give my answer to some of those concerns, there's going to be people who are not satisfied. They're going to still be angry and upset. I ended up with quite a bit of hostility. I figure I'll spend a little bit of time actually reading you guys some of the feedback that I got. This is a feature in some shows that I've seen sometimes where, celebrities, real celebrities, okay, but I'm not a celebrity at all, but, I'm a person who puts myself out there sometimes publicly and then gets a reaction. And sometimes people will actually read out loud the things that are said about them on the internet. And maybe you might enjoy hearing some of that. And then also I'll just read some of the other reaction to it. It's not going to be in any great order because, like I said, I'm just going to go through. I've got a Twitter feed a mile long of all the people who reacted to me last night. I've got some stuff on Facebook as well. But let me say one thing at the outset, right? There's one legitimate issue that Tucker did not address clearly. He sort of alluded to it, kind of like halfway through the discussion and everything. And by then we had focused so long on whether prostitution was empowering for women, or he was trying to push that issue, although I was saying it was essentially irrelevant when you're talking about what a government should be doing. He was focusing on that. And then he sort of alluded to whether there were children involved. He never really alluded to trafficking per se, but if you look at the kind of byline of the video on Facebook, it talks about that the Backpage.com was supposedly a pro-child trafficking site. I don't think it was. As far as I know, it was not. So my understanding, Backpage.com is nothing I was really familiar with before yesterday. As a matter of fact, the topic that we were supposed to be talking about yesterday was going to be abortion, the Ohio abortion ban. So it turned out that because Jeff Sessions had said some things in praise of the federal government taking down Backpage.com, he had said that on Monday, then Tucker made it into a topic he wanted to do on Tuesday. And I just happened to be someone who would be able to have a debate with him about that issue. So it worked out really nicely. But no, Backpage.com is nothing that I was really familiar with. As I understand it, it was exactly what he said. It was the kind of like a classified website, sort of like a Craigslist, but primarily there was ability to advertise and connect with people having to do with prostitution and other types of sex work, primarily for those people. And then sometimes yes, someone would be a child who would be either offering herself, or then there'd be some pimp, I guess, offering a child for sex work of some kind, right? Um, so, sometimes it would be used that way, but my understanding was Backpage.com was not primarily about trafficking. And trafficking, I understand to mean where somebody is doing sex work or other types of work against their will. In fact, I was reading a statistic that said that most trafficking that you see actually funnels into other types of labor, not sex work. And that would make sense, right? Because it's like, sex work would be something where you'd have to be some sort of a willing participant, probably, for it to work at all. And there's other types of labor. It's like, okay, take hammer, hit nail, that I guess you could funnel somebody into against their will a lot more easily. So, in terms of trafficking, it's not as common to traffic somebody into sex work, but it happens, right? So, the way I looked at this website was, it's like a gun, okay? Guns are sometimes used to murder people for school shootings, horrible atrocities. And yet we're not going to ban guns anytime soon. This website was a tool, and it was a tool that some people use to engage in perfectly consensual behavior among adults, which was all part of the introduction that Tucker gave. And again, Tucker's emphasis from the outset, he set the tone of the discussion, was adult women and whether this was empowering for adult women. And wasn't I, as someone who was concerned with the well-being of women as a feminist, wasn't I somebody who would think that it's good that you shut down this website because sex work and prostitution are not empowering for women? So that was the tone and sort of the parameters, the focus that he was setting for this short discussion. And then, as I said, later he sort of alludes to children, but not really. It's like young women with older men. And the way that I took the turn of the discussion at that point was that he was starting to talk about the safety issues. And in the reading that I had done about Backpage before I went on to the show, I saw that in terms of safety has improved for women since there have been online resources like this. Again, some women choose to engage in this type of work. For me, as an objectivist, it wouldn't be my choice. But I'm not going to go around and evaluating and saying, what government should do on the basis of whether or not this is an empowering choice for adult women to make for themselves. Any adult woman should be able to decide what she does with her own time and body and everything else, as long as it's a consensual transaction. So that's my concern. And my understanding was that was primarily what we were talking about. As I said, he shifted it and he started to sort of allude to younger girls with older men. And so what I said to him is what I had heard was that basically any of the safety issues, as I understand it, have been mitigated by the availability of online resources. And one of the stats that I read was that there had at one point been some sub list on Craigslist, the big classified ad site. I forget what it was called. I don't think it was called escort services. It was something different than personals, because now, Craigslist has taken out the personal ads entirely, in reaction to some of the legislation that I alluded to towards the end. Okay. Some of the legislation that has been done in conjunction with this, FOSTA. Let me find the acronyms for you really quick. I've got about 5 browser windows. FOSTA is one of the acronyms. SESTA is another acronym. As I understand it, those pieces of legislation have been passed, but maybe not signed yet. But what I do know is that after these pieces of legislation were passed and not even yet signed by Trump, suddenly Craigslist and Reddit and other sites are taking down whole sections of their websites having to do with the dissemination of information about sex or personal ads or things like this. Long story short, go back to Craigslist, right? There was some section of Craigslist that existed, I think 2010 or whatever. And they had said that when Craigslist put this online as a resource for women, that the murder rate for women had gone down something like 17%, that women were safer because of the availability of communicating through online resources. And in particular, with respect to Backpage, that site apparently offered the ability of women to alert each other, warn about unsafe clients in sex work and stuff. So, I guess sort of like Uber, or Airbnb and stuff, you can rate and give evaluations or whatever. Like I said, I didn't know anything about Backpage. I understand it just to be an information clearinghouse that was primarily used for perfectly consensual transactions among consenting adults. And so my purpose of, for going there was to, say, no, the government had no business shutting this down, if that's the case. If you're really concerned about trafficking, another thing that I read in one of the articles was that that what this website did is put out in the open some of the information about how to find the trafficking, the people who are the perpetrators of trafficking or any sort of child pimping or whatever, you would call it. They call it child sex trafficking, I guess. Anybody who is doing that could be more easily found and fleshed out because it was here in this online marketplace. So if you take it down, in effect, you have them all back out on the streets and everything else, and you just make the problem worse. So, from everything I understand, this website was a tool. Maybe it wasn't always perfect. Maybe you could even go in there and say, hey, Backpage, you had this filtering algorithm and you allowed and you should have known that you were allowing certain child sex traffickers to do something. And so you need to make this tweak or whatever. Otherwise, you are complicit in this. I don't think anybody, wanted to be complicit in child sex trafficking through this site. That was not the way that people were primarily using it or anything else. But yeah, there's sometimes some bad actors. Robert over at YouTube is saying maybe they're just going to simply migrate to Tinder or some other site. Who knows? And then is Tinder going to be next, as I talked about last night? Got one question. Do you consider yourself a feminist and or libertarian, or did you just not want to confuse Carlson? So, you've got this 4.5 minutes or whatever it's going to be. And I go in there having certain things that I think need to be said, so I have to say, what is a proper function of government? It has to do with rights. There's not a rights violation inherent in the normal functioning of this website, which is to facilitate transactions among consenting adults, make those points. I was ready to make a couple subsidiary points that I'll talk about in a second, but then I really wanted to get to some of the disturbing implications of taking a website down like this, how it was part of that larger coordinated effort to remove information about sex generally off the net, and how bad I think that is, because I think sex is a good thing, right? I'm not necessarily myself somebody who would, be in favor ethically of prostitution or other types of sex work. I have some qualms about that, but sex generally is collateral damage for a lot of what they're doing. And in fact, one of the comments that Sessions had made on Monday was that he was happy, I think, to be shutting down illicit commercial sex or something. And he clearly is doing this out of an ethical judgment, and government should not be in the business of imposing ethics, some preferred set of ethics on other people. That's not the job of government. So, come in there to talk about that. And then I wanted to say, okay, there's this implication of taking information about sex off the web more generally. Those two pieces of legislation that I referred to apparently have troubling constitutional implications, First Amendment implications. And as I said, different sites, Reddit and other sites, were already taking things down even before Trump signed this thing into law. And that's really scary. I mean, this is censorship. And then, yesterday and today, of course, as well, Zuckerberg is hauled before Congress. if Zuckerberg's hauled before Congress, one of the things that they want to do, and in fact, I watched a congressman grill him. They were saying they want him to advocate for regulation of his business and any business, I guess, like his. It's not like they can pass a law regulating only Facebook. They would have to write it in some sort of generalized terms such that any new entrant into the field would have to meet the requirements of the legislation, set big barriers to entry and all this stuff, right? So anyway, they haul him before and they want to take it over. And those people who follow my work know that I have huge concerns about government taking over YouTube, that I'm streaming on right now, or Facebook, anything else. I have concerns about this. And it is because these websites, first of all, they've been this great platform, a free and open platform where anybody can share any idea about anything. And it's been therefore a powerful tool that a whole lot of us who, don't work for the New York Times, or, we don't have a show on Fox News or anything else. We can get out there and try to spread ideas to change the culture for the better. It's been a great source of hope for us. And if government can come in, first of all, they can control that. And the ability to control with this particular type of platform is different than any of the media distribution platforms in the past, because these platforms not only distribute content, but they also collect information about the users. So, Ben Shapiro actually tweeted out earlier today. He was kind of funny. He said something like, Zuckerberg must think it's awesome that, I forget what percentage it was, but, he's like, Zuckerberg must love it that, I think it was 63%. You guys can go check my accuracy of the citation on Twitter, but he said something like that Zuckerberg must love it that for 63% of the congressmen sitting in front of him, he's got dick pics on him and he can release them at any time or something. And, there's a lot of private information that Facebook has about people. And the real question is, do you want that in the hands of government? Because, with Zuckerberg, what do I have to go back and actually look at Zuckerberg's testimony in detail and watch him and see what he says and kind of reevaluate. But my impression of Zuckerberg has been up to this point, and it may still be after watching the testimony, that he is this guy who, wants to go in business and make a whole pile of money, that he wants to change the world for the better in the process in a certain sort of way. And he wouldn't mind using the value that he created and gave to the world in order to push his sort of vision of what would make a better world. Does he necessarily want to take over the world, and he's wants to be Big Brother and all those things? I don't necessarily think that about him. There's been a lot of people who've been watching the testimony, and I don't know if they go into it thinking certain things about Zuckerberg or not, but they have said, oh, well, Zuckerberg, he knows that if he's in on the formulation of the regulations that are going to apply to him and his industry, that he's going to be able to corner a market because he's going to make it that much harder for anybody else to enter and compete with him and everything else. I don't know. Let's look and see what we think of Zuckerberg. But to me, I went in there yesterday thinking it was crucially important to spell out the implications of shutting down this Backpage, because everybody thinks, oh, well, Backpage. I mean, first of all, like I said, I didn't even really know about it. I didn't know about Backpage.com. I maybe heard of it once. I just, I'm ignorant. I'm sorry. But, people think, oh, it's fine to shut this down because really it's just about prostitution, which is illegal in so many places anyway, regardless of whether it should be illegal or not. Let's forget that. It's illegal in certain places anyway. And sometimes the site maybe was used to sell services, sex services performed by children. Of course, we all know that that's wrong. And of course, I agree that is wrong. That should be stopped. But, they think, okay, who cares if we shut down this whole site? If we use this overbroad measure of shutting down an entire site simply to address what are probably a few isolated crimes, and they could have gone after the perpetrators of those. A lot of people just sit by and say, oh yeah, Backpage.com, it's just about prostitution and who cares about that? And, sometimes there was trafficking, and we all know that trafficking is bad, but, let's not think about whether that site was actually designed for trafficking or anything else, right? So people just sit by and not look at the disturbing implications, not look at the coordinated censorship measures about information about sex that are out there, the legislation, and also not look at the broader climate right now in which we've got congressmen that are Republicans and Democrats both sitting there eagerly going after this fresh meat of Zuckerberg out on the floor of of Congress, and just grilling him. And, one guy, like I said, one guy was berating him yesterday saying, I want you to come back here and push for this piece of legislation that we're talking about, honest, whatever the hell it is. They're trying to get him to sanction what they're doing, sanction government takeover of this platform. And these platforms right now are the hope for changing the culture for the better. They're the hope for so many of us, I guess not Tucker, I learned yesterday, but so many of us would like to achieve a government that is smaller, a society that is freer. And how are we going to be able to do that if government gets control over all these platforms and clamps down on us and uses not only its ability to filter the content that everybody sees, but also uses all the private information that it gathers about us? In what ways can it use that private information? There has been some discussion about artificial intelligence and Facebook's ability to manipulate us in certain ways based on what it puts in our feeds. From what I understand, that technology is not very sophisticated yet, but all I know is if these tools exist, I do not want them in the hands of government for sure. If the tools exist and they are effective and we're actually being brainwashed on Facebook or whatever, then yeah, I want to know that. And I would get off, Facebook, because why? Why do I want to do that? Or what do you do? I guess if you know that they're doing this in certain ways, you strictly limit the time that you're on there and you do your marketing for your shows or whatever, and you get off. But I couldn't promote that. Anyway, so government is the thing that I'm concerned about, right? Because unless you have that entity which has the power not just to sell you things, but use force against you, send the IRS after you and all the different things that government does today to control our lives, that's where it's really scary. And that's where, there's a number of conservatives. I mean, Ted Cruz was out there. It was so disappointing to see this, but Ted Cruz was out there grilling Zuckerberg about supposed censorship and asking him in particular about Planned Parenthood, of all things. Whether there had been any Planned Parenthood ads shut down versus, I guess, ads from some conservatives or something. If you have a senator grilling a businessman in a congressional hearing about this sort of stuff, this is implying that the government thinks it's in a position to be doing something about this. And I would have expected Ted Cruz, among anyone, to know that it is not a proper function of government to do this. And in fact, when I posted the link to the Daily Caller video of this grilling, he really let, Zuckerberg have it, and Daily Caller's all happy about this. I reminded people I've got in my liked videos on my YouTube page, I have got the video from a few years ago when Senator Ted Cruz was so eloquent on the floor of the Senate on behalf of freedom of speech, and talking in particular about corporations speaking by using their money and everything else. So why is it okay, for instance, the Citizens United sort of way, for corporations to use their money to further ideas, that they believe in and support and everything else, which he clearly understood in that speech? Why is it then so wrong for Mark Zuckerberg to engage in filtering using this platform that he has created and given everybody and let everybody use for free out there on the internet. He's saying, look, I'm going to let you spread your ideas to a large extent, enough that you feel at least it's worth your time for you to stick around here. But yeah, am I going to potentially sometimes nudge you in certain ways according to the fact that I don't like hate speech, however you define it, or I would like to push a little bit more of a liberal agenda versus conservative? I go on there typically saying, okay, I know that that is the type of platform that he has. I've never been banned from Facebook. Sometimes Facebook has not accepted a boost request that I've had on my show page. But I think, for instance, if I did it for this video, I think it's just they don't have the manpower to, have somebody watch my video and decide that it doesn't have me slaughtering animals or something like that horrible YouTube shooter the other time. She had really graphic stuff, right? They don't have the manpower. So if I put in, my small $10 boost request, or it's not worth the $10 for them to have somebody like watch my whole video. I think mostly that's that. Sometimes if you have an ad and it has too high a proportion of text in the graphic, they don't like that. That's one of their rules. Okay, it's their platform. They have the ability to do that. So I was really disappointed in Ted Cruz being part of that questioning. And so, like I said, overall yesterday, one of the big things that I wanted to do during that segment with Tucker was alert people to the danger, that this is part of a broader context in which the government is trying to clamp down on information sharing on the internet. And first it's backpage.com because it's just prostitution and, well, maybe sometimes child sex and sex trafficking. And we'll not tell you how big a problem that is. So everyone will just be quiet. And then that sets the precedent for further and further shutdowns and clampdowns on the internet. And it's, like I said, it's already happening. I assume it's going to be challenged. And I would love to maybe help out and learn more about the challenges, this FOSTA and SESTA legislation. They have long names, this legislation, and it's all like, you know how these names of legislation are. It's let us make you think that you're being protected by government, we'll take care of you. But really what we're doing is we're infringing on your rights. It's that sort of legislation. It's so awesome. Now let's see here. I've been talking already for quite a long time. I do this. I didn't think I had anything to say, and then I always do. Yeah, Nick says you were the last segment, not in the middle. That's every time when I go there, right? The conditions are just a little bit different. How early do I show up? And then at what time does he actually put me on? He's been always telling me it's like right at the middle of the show, but sometimes he then bumps me a couple other segments, and that's fine. I mean, there was just so much going on yesterday, and then he had Glenn Greenwald and everybody else. So that just happens. But yeah, I'm sitting there and they've got the thing in my ear. So I'm listening to stuff about Syria and, Trump and Stormy Daniels or whatever. And so yeah, I've got the different things going through my mind before he goes on. Nick says, before he broke for the commercial, before your segment, he made you look like the modern day feminist. So I didn't even see that, of course. And this is the thing. I don't see him either. I don't see anything from him. I only hear him. So I'm looking at a screen that's essentially just me. The picture that I took that I put on Facebook and Instagram, that is what I see the entire time. I never see him. I don't see him when I'm talking to him. So it's not like, when I'm having my show with Yaron, it's great because like like right now where I'm looking, I'm seeing him when I do that. And it's nice. It's like we're having this nice conversation, and it's not that way with Tucker. It's a little more awkward. I still, I get the tone of voice and everything. And I still have the conversation, but it's not quite as nice as being able to see him. Jay says, don't forget you're also a libertarian. So yeah, when I go in there and they call me whatever they call me, I have to think, do I want to spend time correcting the label? No, I don't want to spend any of the precious time that I have and the points that I would like to make. As I said, some of the points that I wanted to make would, of course, be to address any of the legitimate issues about any child or generally sex trafficking, because of course, anything that involves children is not consensual. Anything that involves trafficking is also against someone's will, even though they're adults. And, that's what I see to be the difference between those types of activities and crimes. Those are actually crimes versus prostitution and sex work generally. So I would separate those off. I would have said that my understanding of this website is that it's not primarily a tool for that. And so, just as you wouldn't ban guns because sometimes they're used for ill, you would not ban this entire website, this tool, because it's sometimes been used for this. You would narrowly tailor your response as law enforcement. You would narrowly tailor that response in order to go after the real bad guys. And in fact, as I said, some of the experts have argued that these websites give law enforcement more tools to go after the bad guys because the bad guys are exposing themselves more. It's very easy to find some of these bad guys on the internet when these, kind of classified ads websites are available. So, anyway, let's see here. I'm not sure. Oh, you guys are talking in Zoom here. I didn't understand the comment, Nick. I'm sorry. So Nick was making a comment about how all I do when I'm in that studio is I hear Tucker, but Zoom allows for more. Zoom does allow for more. I don't know whether Zoom delivers the sort of quality of image that Tucker needs for the show for Fox or anything else. Of course, a goal of mine would be someday to be able to go ahead and do a show like that just from here, from my own computer and stuff. I think it's pretty decent quality. And in fact, who are those two conservative women? They're Black and they're really funny and they're cool. I forget their names. Anyway, they are on Fox sometimes. And I swear they're on just from their normal home studio. Yeah, Diamond and Silk. Yeah, they're so funny. I mean, certainly don't agree with them very much because they're very pro-Trump and everything, but they're funny and entertaining and they're very cute. And yeah, often, as far as I know, they're appearing just from their home studio with the computer and everything. So I don't see why that couldn't happen at a certain point. Maybe I have to make something pretty behind me or whatever first, but why not? Why not do it that way as well? And then if I could see him, if I could use Zoom software and actually see him while I'm talking to him, yeah, it'd be more fun. Who knows? Maybe it would be more distracting too, right? Because, what do I do when he'll always set up the issue just slightly differently than I'm anticipating it, or often I guess I don't even think about all the various ways he could set up the issue. I'm thinking of like one straightforward way. And then it always comes in just a little bit differently than I think. And so do I address this little different angle that he's coming in with or not? So do I want to get into a discussion about whether prostitution or other sex work is, quote, empowering for women, or do I want to stay more on point? And yesterday I chose to stay more on point about it, because again, the whole question was, what should government be doing about this? And on my view, which he ended up calling, what was it, simplistic. And he had, that was another, I could have tried to challenge him about his slams at libertarianism, even though I'm not technically fully a libertarian. I have to let all that just go right by and continue to make the points that I think are important to make, because it's this sort of insult of me, because, oh yeah, I used to be this naive libertarian, but at least you have a coherent viewpoint. Oh, pat me on the back, right? Just got to let it all go. Anyway, Nick says, I never even knew he was a libertarian, what he was doing 10 years ago. Yeah, some people say he wasn't even really a libertarian 10 years ago. Mindless libertarian quotes someone over in the YouTube chat. Let me see what I'm missing over here in the YouTube chat. Do I have notes on what I'm going to talk about when I go in? Yeah, so I had one page of notes, and the notes that I had, let me go ahead and look at them over here on the computer. Yeah, so it was making the separation between what I think ethically about prostitution and other sex work versus what should be done by government. Just making very clear that a government's role is only to address violations of rights, any initiation of force. And so in these transactions, that is not involved. And so the feds, therefore, should not have shut down the website. That's the obvious basic point. And the point that I did make about how it's not the American way to force lifestyle preferences and choices on other people was, again, something that I had prepared to say. Another thing that I had prepared to say, and I said it, a little bit in implication before I went on to my final big points that I wanted to get to, was the issue of the safety of the women. All of this, Sessions is cheering himself because supposedly they were protecting the women. And my understanding is that the women are safer if they are able to communicate with potential clients and also communicate with each other by the medium of this, this classified site, basically this information clearinghouse that was Backpage. And so the working conditions of people who chose to do this, again, it's purely consensual by adults for the most part. They were safer when this site was up, and they have real concerns about the fact that they've got to now go back out on the street and stuff. Their job is going to be made more hazardous, but supposedly they're being protected. And all of this is why, because politicians and bureaucrats don't approve ethically of this. And as I said, you could see it in some of what Sessions said about illicit commercial sex. He doesn't approve of it ethically. Well, it's not his job to approve or not of it. It's perfectly legal in some places. And this is an information clearinghouse about that. It's not his job. I had an analogy prepared as well, right? I would think, and again, it's an analogy designed to appeal to Tucker's context. The analogy is this: I think it would be wrong to refuse any effective medical treatment if you were doing so for religious reasons. I think it would be ethically wrong to do that because you're doing it based on faith, which is irrational, right? Nonetheless, I don't think it's government's role to interfere and force any medical treatment on a consenting adult of sound mind. So I had that prepared in case. But then the other stuff that I had prepared were the final 2 points that I was concerned about censorship of information about sex in general on the internet, given the legislation that had been passed recently. And finally, ominously, that this would set a precedent for shutting down further websites. Maybe it's Tinder next, and then it's going to be, Facebook, Twitter, and everything else. So yeah, I always prepare something. And then the question is, do I always get to every point that I prepared? And, do I feel like I have to read notes? Yesterday I didn't have to read notes at all. So that was a good thing. Nick says, people like Sessions and Tucker are just like the left. They aren't motivated by love, but the hate in their hearts. So supposedly they're for freedom, but they'll screw over anyone they disagree with. In this case, women. Yeah. And that's the thing. I think given that women are going to make this choice, which is a choice that they should be free to make, I'm not going to impose my ethics on anybody else. Those women will be safer if they have these methods of communication available to them. And, so it's really vicious to take down a site like that, in my view, because you're making them less safe under the guise of so-called protecting them, which is ridiculous. Let me get over. Yeah, Robert says 5 minutes is not enough. The format sucks. It kind of does. And so all you can really hope for is to make a few important points. And as I said yesterday, with Zuckerberg being before Congress, that most important point to make was getting people to think very carefully about whether they wanted government to start clamping down on these websites that allow for the distribution of information, the sharing of information over the internet. First is Backpage. Eventually it's going to be Facebook. And it looks like it's going to be Facebook sooner rather than later. The Dr. iScope over on YouTube says, on your first appearance, he called you a leftist and you didn't correct him. Then maybe you'll be a leprechaun next. Like whatever. It could get pretty funny. He could start calling me different things each time. So let's see here. Facebook works to nudge people towards what makes it popular, constant promotion, et cetera. Yeah, I mean, they have their algorithms. And what we all have to do when we're, suppose we're trying to promote certain ideas on Facebook or any of these other platforms, we all have to make the decision after a certain period of time whether it's worth continuing to do it. And sometimes we may not know whether our failure to reach more people is due to just the fact that our content is not appealing to people, or on the other hand, whether it's because there's some sort of a filtering algorithm inherent in the platform itself. And some people suspect that when it maybe isn't that. Whatever it is, we all have to make our individual choices about whether to continue. Robert says, would I describe Tucker as second? I'm not going to describe Tucker as anything or talk about his motivation or whatever. To me, it doesn't matter. I mean, for whatever reason, Tucker has said that he wants to have interesting discussions on his show with people who have differing viewpoints. And for that reason, he's had me on a few times, which is a great thing. And we've had these good conversations about important topics. And so long as he continues to do that, and then I find the discussions valuable, and then I'm able to reach more people and everything else, I would continue to go ahead and do it. I'm not worried about the motivation. Unshell Coast says, I think it's, is it just that the content doesn't appeal? Our viewpoint is rather obscure. Yeah, and right now, even among people who are fans of Ayn Rand's philosophy, there's all this hostile infighting and everything else. And I'm ignored by half the people who call themselves objectivists when I go out there and do stuff like this anyway, which, that's exciting too. So even, among objectivists, I'm having I often have more success reaching outside than I do within. And I had a friend who just a day or two ago had this great meme. It was Litmus Donnie that Trump has been sort of a litmus test among our circle. And if you are really pro-Trump, then you ends up putting you in one category. And if you're against Trump, or for at least, you're willing to criticize Trump, that puts you in a different category entirely. Yorick Return says that Carlson does seem oddly emotional and irrational recently. He did seem a bit more reactive in the segment with me, but I attributed that yesterday to the fact that it was towards the end. And one of the topics that he was talking about, when he was talking about with Greenwald just before me, was he seemed to, get pretty down about the fact that even though he was questioning the wisdom of going into Syria, and that's something that journalists should do, right? Whether the United States has an interest in going into Syria, that he was getting a lot of flack for it. And I guess he was very sensitive to that feedback that he was getting. Daniel says, I know this is off topic. With all your conversations with Yaron, I'm curious as to why you often describe yourself as a libertarian versus an objectivist. I actually don't describe myself as libertarian. Typically, when I'm doing an intro to my show, I describe myself as an individualist. And that is a way to, sort of give people some content and not confuse them and not use in language and stuff, but not say anything inaccurate either. So typically I say individualist. Yesterday I was, I had the producer in my ear and he was saying, I think they had intended to introduce me as a liberal feminist atheist again. And I had said, well, liberal if you call me classical liberal. So I used the term classical liberal when I was talking with him. And then he turned that into libertarian. So, he's doing what he can, the producer. I'm not going to sit there, like I said, and take my 4.5 minutes and correct him and say, oh, objectivist. Objectivist is not going to mean anything. So what I say, I use individualist. Libertarian at least, means something. when I use the type of arguments that I did yesterday, it doesn't surprise Tucker. Now, I wonder, maybe he didn't really want to talk to a libertarian, who knows? Maybe he was a little bit annoyed, but I think it was just the accumulation of all the different things that he was talking about on the show yesterday. Dr. Icecope says, I was actually surprised when he backed off when you happened to speak at the same time. I was really grateful. Maybe he recognized that thing that I wanted to say at the very end was really important to me, because I don't think speaking fast or loud or any of it. I think I was still using the measured pace, but I could tell, I was just so insistent that I was going to get that point in about the necessity of conservatives in particular, which is the audience of Fox News, thinking about whether they really want government to be in charge of these platforms. And like I said, the shutting down of Backpage.com, I saw that as feeding into this whole movement to clamp down on the free sharing of information on the internet. And yeah, the free sharing of information on the internet can sometimes be used to help terrorists and identity thieves and child sex traffickers and all these horrible people. But go after those people. We are sophisticated enough to come up with tailored ways to go after the bad guys without shutting down freedom of expression for everybody else. And as I said, you don't want to live in the world of 1984. And the world of 1984 is when we've got screens and devices that are both feeding us approved content and absorbing all this information about us. And that's what the platforms and devices do today. That's what they do. And right now they're in the hands of businessmen who want to sell us things. Okay. Some people find that really troubling. If you find it really troubling that, you go to a different website and then suddenly an ad is put in front of you and it had something to do with a message that you sent somebody on Facebook or whatever, because they use keyword like scanning mechanisms or whatever in the things. If all this bothers you, then don't go on the platforms. I know people that are just so averse and no, they would never have a Facebook account or anything else. Okay, don't. That's okay. It's a choice. But imagine that it's not just in the hands of a businessman who wants to sell you stuff, but instead it's in the hands of government that wants to control you because these guys want to stay in power and they see you as a threat. And, again, you talk about who was it on Shell Coast, I think, who was saying, yeah, our content isn't popular. If our content isn't popular enough to get a huge following, say on YouTube, imagine how unpopular our content is in the sense that we are easy targets for somebody in government who sees us as a threat because we make effective arguments and who wants to shut us down, right? So that was, like I said, my overall thing. I'm hoping that anybody who, took the time, thank you if you took the time to come here today and you had disagreed with some of the things I said yesterday, or you thought I was implying that I was in favor of child sex trafficking or anything else, that you see I'm not that person, that I was concerned with the issue of voluntary transactions among consenting adults, which is my understanding of what Backpage.com was primarily used for, that it's not a pro child sex trafficking website or anything like that. I wouldn't defend that if that's what it's for. And that overall, the thing that we all should be concerned about as lovers of freedom, liberty, the ability to live our lives according to our own judgment, to pursue our happiness. The biggest fish we have to fry right now is the ability to continue to connect with other people and share freely on the internet. And that's at risk right now. That is at risk right now. And I saw, as I said, Backpage.com as the first step, a step that most people, they just don't find it controversial, right? Because, it's just prostitution. Who cares about prostitutes? Like, no. People are making legitimate choices in the exercise of their individual rights, and government has no business shutting them down. And we have to be vigilant in criticizing this and standing up against it if we hope to prevent the next step and the next step and the next step in moving, like I said, toward 1984. Daniel says, I think that making prostitutes less safe by taking away escort ads is likely a government methodology to discourage prostitution. Sure, right? There had probably been some who had been accustomed to, conducting their business that way. Maybe some women decided that it seemed safe enough that they would go ahead and start engaging in prostitution or other types of sex work. As I understand it, other types of sex work would encompass just talking about sex and things. And I would still have trouble with that. That would not be something ethically that I would choose to do. But I think everyone has a perfect right to do it. And there are, a number of women, as I understand, there's a whole community with blogs and everything talking about misconceptions that they believe people like you and I have about what that type of work is like and whether it actually could be empowering and everything else. It's not a choice I would make, but it is a choice that I think they should be free to make. And certainly they should be able to also spread the information about why they think it is a good and ethical choice for them to make. There's no rights of anybody that they're violating by doing this. Yorick says, instead of asking why there are so many mass shootings, people only talk about gun control. Instead of asking why so many people see sex as so trivial, people only talk about prostitution control. Yeah, I see it as the same issue. It's shut down this website, take everybody's guns. Why? Because sometimes they can be used in ways that violate people's rights. There's also things that people do with guns that don't necessarily violate other people's rights, but like ethically, I wouldn't like it. So for me, if you were just going out and shooting animals because you somehow got kicks out of being cruel to the animals that you were killing for no good reason, no, horrible. Now, are you violating anybody's rights doing it? No, but so again, there's choices that I would say, okay, I protect your right, or I would argue for your right to engage in this, but ethically, it's not anything that I would do. Yeah, it was like government establishing prohibition to discourage drinking. We have the war on drugs now. And what is Donald Trump doing? He's expanding the war on drugs. So there is one interesting discussion that I had with somebody. There is a website called Ashley Madison, and it was in the news, I believe, because a number of congressmen were caught. I guess they'd had affairs through Ashley Madison. They networked with people. And I have not been on this site. I don't know if I don't even think I went and visited. I put backpage.com into the browser yesterday when I was doing research. And of course, I came up with that federal government shut this down, and look at all these agencies. You should be impressed with how many federal agencies are involved in shutting this down, how bad they must be if all these agencies, right? That whole warning was on there. When Ashley Madison was in the news, I didn't have a reason to go even look at the website or anything. But someone who was writing on Facebook was saying that maybe that site should be shut down because it encourages infidelity. And, so I was engaging in an interesting discussion there, right? Because you could say, okay, there's just prostitution, where prostitution doesn't necessarily encourage infidelity. There could be single men or something that they, or women. And that was another thing that I was prepared to say if there was time, right? And I should have done that, right? Because it's feminist. Male prostitutes exist as well. What's this discrimination against men? And you talk about this is only a women's issue and whether it's empowering. Let's talk about, male prostitutes as well. That would have been a way that conversation could have gone. In any event, anything that's just prostitution doesn't necessarily promote infidelity. But this guy was saying that he believes the Ashley Madison website does. And I said, are you sure that they promote it, right? Because if it's marital infidelity, you could say that marriage is a contract. And so perhaps the website could be seen as engaging in a tort. There's a tort that we learn in law school called tortious interference with contract. So if Ashley Madison, the website, is actually encouraging people to break their marital contracts, that could be seen as a tort. And then you could say, if that's really the whole purpose of this site, then shut it down. And he said, Yeah, he thinks that that's what it is because there's like some logo. I still haven't gone to look at the site, but he said that there's like a slogan at the top of it that says, "Life is short, have an affair." And in my understanding of the word affair, and I went ahead and actually looked at the definition of affair, even though I didn't look at Ashley Madison. Affair doesn't necessarily refer to something that you engage in only if you're married, but it does have a connotation of a liaison that's sort of more trivial in nature. It's not anything that you're, serious about and engaging in a long-term relationship with somebody that you might consider a soulmate or anything like that. An affair is a less serious liaison. So, is that slogan actually encouraging marital infidelity per se? Not necessarily. And they could say, I mean, certainly they could have a lawyer in a court of law raise an issue of reasonable doubt and everything else. I don't know, would a tort case succeed? Yorick over at YouTube says, on a serious note, as a young person, I feel sad that almost everyone in my generation views sex as evil or trivial. Yeah. And, that would have been an interesting direction for the conversation, because someone like Tucker would say the only way that you could have any sort of a serious ethical view about sex would be if you're a religious person. And I think Ben Shapiro would say that as well. Ben Shapiro had talked about in Atlas Shrugged, Dagny Taggart is jumping from bed to bed or something, which is ridiculous because the novel, the timeline of the novel in which you're following Dagny Taggart's personal life spans decades, and there are 3 men, so and they're all good men. So the idea that you've slept with 3 men over a course of decades and you've chosen all good men, I don't think that that's a bad track record at all, right? And nobody says that for sex to be important that you have to be 100% sure that the person that you're sleeping with is your final choice. You hope that that's always the case, but some people, it would take a few more tries than 3 maybe to find the exact right person for the rest of your life, right? Some of us are a little slow. So, but in terms of objectivism does have a serious view of sex, that this is nothing that you engage in lightly, that it's an important celebration of yourself and life and existence and productivity. And it's not anything that you could really experience fully, for example, if you engaged a prostitute. And as a prostitute, it might be something that you would not be able to experience properly because you were doing it for work. I mean, I wouldn't know, but I could only say that it's something that would perhaps take away from your experience of sex and its proper understanding, according to the ethics that I subscribe to. So that could be an interesting topic, but it's a lot more than 4.5 minutes or something to talk about what are the ethics of sex according to religion versus a secular ethics like objectivism and things like that. Jay says, I always see objectivism as Ayn Rand's philosophy. Since I'm not her, I don't like calling myself by that label. Individualist is good enough to get the ball rolling, and any further discussion stems from my own mind without relying on any and everything Rand ever said. Rand has taught me so much in terms of sort of a basic framework that I use to come at the world and think about things, and particularly privacy issues. I've just drawn on her framework so much in exploring my ideas about privacy. But obviously my work on privacy is not any part of her philosophy. And so this is part of another discussion in Zoom. Sorry, you guys. This is the earlier discussion in Zoom. Nick says, is it so difficult just to say objectivist? Even if it doesn't mean anything, you take 30 seconds and give quick background. Anybody who comes to my website will find all the links to Rand. I mean, if you see the about at my blog, it's a quotation from Rand right there under Don't Let It Go, referring to the American sense of life. So it's there for anybody who wants to find it. And many times in my show, I say, I'm an individualist. I subscribe to Ayn Rand's philosophy. The term objectivist just doesn't mean anything to so many people. And of course, in some shows, I might find it important to even say, why does she call it objectivism, and go into more detail. I could see doing that. I'm not adverse to doing it, but as I'm trying to reach people who don't understand the language, I will say individualist to, start the ball rolling. And as far as I know, most things that I say on any of my shows are not things that are going to contradict anything that Rand would have said. Sometimes I'm just taking my best stab at applying her philosophy to some current event that she hadn't confronted. So I don't know for sure that I'm not making a mistake. Sometimes there are certain concretes that I would disagree with her about. But mostly I think everything that I do is in the spirit. I certainly don't want to impute my views and my application of her philosophy to her. I think most people wouldn't make that mistake, but some might. Oh, should I have the producer give me the label objectivist? Maybe, but I mean, they might also have the concern, what does objectivist mean? I always have them just put on the cryon or whatever, the subhead, talk show host. And then, as I said on Tucker, they went ahead on the Facebook site for Tucker's show. They referred people to my blog so people could come there and see it. Producer says Jay is probably just playing to an audience who has some idea of what a libertarian is, but no idea that Rand wrote anything other than fiction. Yeah, probably not. Oh, you guys, it's actually been an hour already, and I did not read to you a lot of the horrible things that were told about me. I'll give you some examples. So when I was talking about that issue of labels, them calling me by labels that are just not quite accurate, and should I spend my time correcting the labels or should I try to get my points in? Some guy says, oh, I'll give you a label, and it was dumbass. That's the accurate label. And that's all he said, not, you're a dumbass because, and then, give me an argument. It's just, I'm a dumbass. I had some guy who just kept coming in and putting just insulting meme after insulting meme. Like he would just keep posting and posting more. If you want to come to, my Facebook page or Twitter or whatever, and say that you disagree with me, and even that you think my view is abhorrent or whatever, come and say it, make some substance, make an argument, just do it once, right? Some guy comes in with, and I get like 10 notifications within a minute. You're going to be blocked. I'm going to block you. I have better things to do with my time than to sift through notifications from some jerk while I'm trying to actually have a conversation with people who want to have a substantive exchange, including my friends and everybody else. So I had some of that. I had people who said that somehow I was arguing for, like I said, the child trafficking. There was apparently one girl that somebody was telling the story. I don't know whether it's accurate or not. One girl, 16 years old, got killed, and maybe as a result of a connection that was made on this site. Again, it's a tool. It's a tool, just like guns are tools. And then the question is, how much do you think the government should control the use of tools that can be used for good or for evil, but as designed and as set up are primarily, they're set up and everything else, they are designed to facilitate things that people have a perfect right to engage in. That's the way I understand that website. Do I want, somebody to get killed? Do I want child trafficking? Do I want any kind of trafficking? Of course not. The whole purpose for me being on Tucker was to argue for a society in which people are freer and freer to act according to their own judgment, to be left free of the initiation of force. And of course, that includes from other people as well. But I see government, particularly today, as quite dangerous in that regard. And so I'm very sensitive to crackdowns. But no, certainly I wanted all sorts of children to be killed, and I'm a horrible person. And how can I be speaking for women was another angle, because, prostitution and other types of sex work are not empowering. In fact, they're so demeaning. And, one woman says, I'm a feminist, and I was really happy they shut down Backpage. To those women, I would say, again, what was the focus of the discussion that I had with Tucker? It wasn't whether it was empowering. You know, my whole point was to say, whatever you and I think ethically about this, we have to think very clearly about what the government's involvement should be in this, whether the government should be shutting down a website. And I say, no, government shouldn't be shutting down a website unless there is a rights violation involved. And here, I did not see that the real rights violations were so pervasive on this communication website, this classified ads information clearinghouse, that the whole thing needed to be shut down. They could have done something a lot more narrowly tailored to get rid of the real bad guys. Yeah, so I just had a number of people saying I was an idiot, I didn't know what I was talking about. Dozens of people coming and just saying the most vicious things. Perhaps I should just read a couple of them just so you can get a flavor before I leave. Then you can get the idea of, what it was like for me to continue to think of coming online today and facing you guys. Facebook has changed its interface again. So when you go to the page where you get the notifications, at least on my phone browser, it's unfamiliar again. So I'm even slower in navigating than I normally am. And probably also because I'm live here, it's using up my bandwidth. So let me see if I can find one of the beautiful hostile reactions that I've gotten. This is probably not one. No, that's not that one. Okay. Oh yeah, there's a great meme going out there. Why the hell is a government that spies on its own citizens lecturing Mark Zuckerberg about privacy? And my answer is because they intend to get Zuckerberg's cooperation in the spying. And that's really what that's all about right now. Okay, now we got a bunch of comments on my own page. If you do go to Tucker Carlson's show page on Facebook, you can read and see and get a thing. Now, some people are very nice. So Ben at my page says, Amy, why do you keep letting them frame you as some nutty leftist or crazy libertarian? Yeah, it's about the labels. Now let's see here. Actually, I got some good, if you go to my page and you see where I shared the video from Tucker, there's a woman named Paisley, and she links to some of the blog information that I alluded to, because, there are a lot of misconceptions about prostitution and other types of sex work that people should maybe take a look at and consider. For myself, I don't see changing my own mind about what my personal lifestyle choice is going to be, but as I said, I'm in full support of the rights to engage in this, and I'm against the shutdown of the site. Okay, so one woman came in and just put a link to, there's 93 counts in the indictment and everything else. Yeah, I'm sure the indictment looks really impressive and really scary. This is too positive a thread. Where I really got the nasty comments was when I just had the photo up and the link to the video wasn't there yet. So let me find that one here. Okay, guy said great job. Oh, so one guy just writes sick, so that's good. Let me go to my own page because I really got some vicious stuff there on my own page on Facebook. Sorry, you guys, I'm scrolling. Yeah, so I posted that little selfie, and that's where I ended up getting on Facebook the most horrible feedback. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. So my little selfie. Yeah. So I got 39 comments, and that one was good. That was nice. Okay. Okay. Disorienting picture. So where are these people? They didn't delete it, did they? Okay, Ashley Madison, we talked about that. So where are these people that I had the vicious, maybe, oh yeah, it's this one. It's got to be this thread. Okay. Oh yeah, okay, here it is. So my friend writes, when I say I'm going to be on Tucker, and my friend writes, is it about Trump by any chance? And I said, no, thank God. And then this guy, Dennis, yes, I'm calling you out, Dennis. He says, I said, no, thank God, it's not about Trump. And he says, Amy Peikoff, yes, thank God, because you are too fucking ignorant to carry on a conversation involving Trump. And by the way, do you know prostitution is a crime? Right. Damn, you are stupid. This is the kind of stuff that I get. Another guy comes in and writes, thoroughly enjoyed the segment, so at least I get a little bit of relief from that. But yeah, so that's one of the early comments. And a lot of people saying it was good. And then one person said, you brought sound reason. And then somebody writes sound reason, and they just put a lot of laughing emoticons. One woman comes in and writes, Cynthia, her name is Cynthia, you are so disgusting, period. That's it. Just, you are so disgusting. Okay. Another one, Lynn, comes in and asks, she says, Amy, I have an honest question for you. You state that you are for women's rights. What are your views about an unborn girl baby and her rights in the womb? As if that has anything to do with anything I didn't answer. I'm not going to talk about abortion now. Actually, like I said, I thought our topic was going to be abortion, but it wasn't. Francis writes, how do you suggest that you are an advocate for women with a straight face? Greg asks, how many mothers of young girls who are being prostituted have you met? Are you a mother to a daughter? Ask a mother how it feels to click on Backpage and see your teenage daughter on there. Lady, you are totally clueless. Loretta writes, is this a prank? Tucker had a loss for words because of how ridiculous you sounded. SMH, shaking my head. And then one guy writes, well done. And then this woman, Gail, comes in and says, really? So you think it was good that a 16-year-old got murdered using this sick site? Too bad that girl will never grow up to be a true woman. Sickoo. SICKOO. Thanks, Gail. That was awesome. Gail then writes her own comment. Sick person. This is not a feminist. This is a narcissist nut. Backpage is a prostitution ring, period. 16 years old girl murdered using this sick site. Unbelievable stupidity. First of all, I did not know that a 16-year-old girl was murdered using this site. And obviously it's that we need to go after, not the site itself, which again, the site itself predominantly was used for people engaging in consensual transactions. And again, part of the literature that I read, the arguments are that when these online forums are available, the number of women and girls who've been murdered decreased. The murder rate among women, I think, decreased 17% with the availability of the Craigslist version of this type of classified ads section. Now, one guy says, and this is a positive one, but I'll just comment a little. I just saw your visit to Tucker Carlson tonight, and I'm happy to say that I think you won. I want to be clear. I don't think anybody really wins in these discussions. When I go in, I don't feel like, oh yeah, I want to win the debate, because it's 4.5 minutes. You don't really win. What you get to do, hopefully, is say a few important things that gets people in the audience thinking and maybe coming out to look for more information. So I made clear that I wanted to do that. Now, yeah, a lot of the people who were insulting, they came in and they only did it one time and didn't come back again, which is at least good that they just did that. Sarah Jane comes in. Pathetic. This is a well-known website for sex trafficking, including children. You are a threat to our children. And I answered her, and she never came back again. I said, Tucker did not raise that issue in particular. If he had, I would have gladly addressed it and planned to on my own show, etc. And then I said, Anne, you could be more polite and realize that Tucker didn't raise the issue, etc. So, yeah, so that's the kind of thing you come back. And of course, a lot of times the negative voices are the loudest. A lot of times people, if they want to say something positive, they don't feel like they have to say anything at all. Thankfully, I had thank you to all of you who did say nice things and balanced out those type of comments. On Twitter, it often gets even more vicious, but you got enough of a taste of it there. I'm not going to subject you to any more of those. But yeah, so you saw. What I have to do in the next few days, I mean, what I kind of see my job as now is try to look at Zuckerberg's testimony. And as I talked about a little bit earlier, I see what I want to do as evaluating to what extent he is cooperating with the government for motives that are not innocent. And regardless of motive, is he going to be cooperating in government in ways that pose such a risk that we should get off Facebook? Those are the two types of questions that I want to look at. And up until this testimony, I've been prepared to think really the best you could expect of Zuckerberg, that he's a very productive individual who has provided us this great value, who is misguided in certain ways, and perhaps a little bit too willing to cooperate with government because of that. Will my opinion of that change? There's been a number of people who have said, oh, I think that really he just wants to be in on the regulation because he wants to corner the market and keep competitors out and everything else. And let's hope he's not trying to do that. And let's also hope that he's not cooperating because he actually wants to create the world of 1984 and somehow turn into Big Brother and everything else. Zach asks over on YouTube, do your appearances on Tucker help boost your YouTube subs? Do you see a noticeable uptick? I saw more of an uptick on Twitter. So, as much as I said I got dozens of really hostile comments on Twitter, I also got something like a couple hundred follows. On YouTube, traffic is a bit lower. And I've talked about this before. There's just so much more traffic on Twitter than there is on YouTube. People have to make an investment. They have to come here and watch a video if they're coming to YouTube. I ask everybody, please, please, please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't yet, because I'd love to get to the 1,000 subscriber mark, which I need to now. You can't monetize on YouTube. You can't use Super Chat unless you've got 1,000. And I think somewhere in the 560s right now. I haven't checked in a little while, but yeah. What else? If the commenters are bolts, are they real people? You could tell maybe that sometimes people are real people. I had one woman, she made some post on Facebook and she tagged me in it and she said, Amy Peikoff believes in promoting child sex trafficking or something. Put this big thing on Facebook. I think anybody who watches that clip and understands the format and really listens carefully to the way that Tucker framed the conversation in terms of women and in terms of whether prostitution and other types of sex work empower women. That's the way he framed it. Then I think they would realize that, no, I'm not promoting that at all. But, as I said, in order to put myself out here, I have to have a thicker skin. And so this is all just practice for me. Zach says maybe you should try to reach out to Dave Rubin, see if you can sit down with him. I would love to sit down with Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin is really busy with really big, awesome guests. So he just went north and interviewed Thomas Sowell and stuff. Eventually, I would love to sit down with Dave Rubin. Perhaps I should not sit down with Dave Rubin until I have a book to sell, right? So I've got to get that book done. That's a big thing. Anyway, speaking of which, so I have a bunch of things to do and I've been on for quite a while now. And I really thank you all for indulging me and talking with me and listening to me today. But I'm going to need to Zoom now. Zoom. I'm over here at Zoom. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and end. And I will talk to you guys next time. I don't know if I'm going to do a show with Yaron this weekend. He's been traveling. I hope that his technology is going to allow us to do it. If so, maybe we can take on some of the Zuckerberg stuff. I would love to have that discussion with him. Come to Yaron with sort of my argument as to how I evaluate Zuckerberg and why, and maybe should we get off Facebook or not, and talk about it with him, because I mean, my gosh, he's just got such a great way of evaluating these. And sometimes I tend towards the overly pessimistic. This last show, he was saying that he also sometimes tends to be pessimistic, but I definitely see him as a more optimistic person than I am. So am I going to look at this testimony and be more worried about it? In some ways, that could be because with my privacy focus, I see implications a little more than him, but still, I think we could have a really good exchange about it. So yeah, I hope he is. If not, I'll see you guys next Wednesday as well. Okay. So thank you, everybody. Take care. I'm just going to go ahead and end the meeting now, but thank you to those of you who have joined me in Zoom. Normally I like to hang out after, but I really do. I gotta get going. So take care. End meeting for everybody.